We're at 74a, about 10 lines from the top, Amarava. We continue to discuss the idea of nipul. If you have like a dangling limb from an animal, and what under what circumstances does it become Aver min achai? What is the status of this if the animal dies, if the animal has shlita? So Amarav, I mean, on a Miso Amarav, where do we get this idea that we discussed already? Misa osa nipul, shlita ena osa nipul. That is, in the case of a dangling limb, if the animal dies of its own accord, then the limb is considered detached. But shlita, if you shech the animal, it does not consider it detached. Anything on which part of it falls when dead shall be tame. Limutemai. So what does that mean? Like b'mosam. What does that include or exclude? Ilema limute b'chayem. So maybe you think it means that anything that any sheretz that falls on something when it's dead, but not when it's alive. Minivlasam nafka. So we already have that idea from the word minivlasam, from its dead body. Elishmamina. So what does bimosam come to exclude? Misas nipul in shchitos nipul. That if it's dead, like it's death makes the dangling limb. Since we're not talking about anything obvious or general, we have to apply this to something. So we're going to apply it to nipul, the dangling limb. That if it dies, bimosam, that's when it's tame. Um, but to exclude if the shchita, that doesn't affect nipul. Amalei Ravada Baraval Rava. So Ravada says Vakra b'shrasim. See, wait a minute. You're taking a pasuk that's talking about shrasim. Trying to interpret it regarding an animal which requires shchita. Sheretz doesn't even require shchita. So he answers him, and okay, I understand that, but we do this all the time in the Gemara, right? Like if you have something that you need to use for some kind of derivation, you can't find anything to apply it to in the present case, in the case that it's talking about, so you apply it to something completely different. The akase mibaile, so Gemara says, well, wait a minute, you still need the phrase b'mosam ke'ein misa, that it has to be something related to death, meaning lachin metami. If it still has, if it isn't completely dried out and decayed, then that makes tame yiveshim and metamim, but not something that's like once it's completely dried up, the sheretz is not metame. So Tzrei b'mosam ksiva, Gemara says, yeah, you're right, but the pasuk uses the word b'mosam twice, so you've got one for each of those. Okay, Amar of Chisa. Machlokas be'ever du ubar chai. The machlokas. Oh, so we're going back now to the Mishnah. If the so the Mishnah was talking about a limb of a fetus that's coming out of the mother when you do the shlita. So does the shlita does that make it an avela or not? Okay, Amar Chisda Machlokas be Aver de Ubar Chai. Talking about the limb of a live fetus, right? That the fetus is still like living. El Be'ever de Ubar Mace, but if it's already stillborn, if it's already not alive, then everybody would agree that if you do shchita on the mother, then the dangling limb of the fetus is considered detached, and the shchita does not apply to the fetus. The fetus is in the vela of Rabba Amar, but Rabba says no, they're talking about both cases, whether it's the fetus is alive or dead. They still have the machlokas in the Mishnah. The Rabbanan say that the shchita applies to the fetus, and the fetus is not in the vela. And Rabbi Meir says no, the fetus is in the vela. Okay, Ben Shmonachai. The Mishnah said. The Mishnah said, Ben Shmona Chai, if you have a fetus that's 8 months old. Okay, so we're assuming here that the gestation of the animal, normal gestation period is 9 months, like a human. And the same principle we have in the Gemara, that an 8-month fetus, a fetus born at 8 months can't survive, the same would apply to the animal. Now, so what about if you have a this case of a dangling limb, a fetus that's coming out of the womb, and it's only an 8 month fetus? So what about that? Is it considered? Does that affect our ruling? Is it considered a potentially live animal, or do we look at it as already dead? Vatanya, so the Mishnah said that that the shechita does not work. That since it's only 8 month fetus, it's considered a nevela. Vatanya, but we have another brisa, Ben Shmona Chayochiach. We have another brisa which refers to Ben Shmona, and if it's born alive, now it could be born alive, and we could still think that it's fatally, it's not viable, right? Because it's only 8 months. And another brisa said that Ben Shmona Chai, a live-born 8 month fetus, can prove its point, can prove a point. Shafal Pishayesh B'mino Shita, even though they're like other cows or sheep or whatever we're talking about here, can it's from a species that requires shchita and shchita sumatarosa. The shchita doesn't make it doesn't take it out of the category of nevela. So even if a treifa can't be, so let's say you have a treifa, right? Something that is not viable, an adult animal that's not viable because of whatever disease or defect it has. So shchita doesn't work, right? If it dies, shchita on a treifa is not good shchita, and the animal is still considered a nevela. And the proof for it is from the 8 month fetus, right? So if we can use the 8 month fetus for a proof of that, then that means that the 8 month fetus is considered a nevela. Um, it is just a second. Um, by bringing this brisa against our Mishnah, it indicates that our Mishnah thinks that the 8 month fetus is not viable and shechita doesn't help, and the brisa disagrees. So what's the dispute? Amar Rav Kana yesh b'mina shechito agav imo, that um, that the brisa holds that it's part of a species, like it's part of a larger species. So. Um, is part of the mother. The mother has shchita applied to her, so the fetus also according to the Brisa, could have shchita applied to it. V'tana didan mina diime lo parich, and the Mishnah doesn't hold that way. It's like so what? So the fetus comes from a viable mother. Doesn't matter. The fetus itself is of a category that's not viable. Well, I tell the parich, and so the Gemara says, okay, so tell me more about the brisa. Treifa de shchitasam taharta minale. Where do you get the idea that the treifa can, according to the brisa, that shchita can take it out of the category of nevela? Nafkalei mid Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Rabbi Yehuda Marav, Amri Lav Masnisa Tana. Some say it was said by Rabbi Yehuda, or some say in the brisa. Amar Kra v'chiyamus mina behema asher hilachem lacha. The Torah talks about in the Vela, if an animal, one of the animals that you can eat dies, then the nevela makes you tame. Mixas behema metama, mixas behema ena metama, because it says min habehema, from the animal, so it's an exclusion. So some kinds of animals become nevela and make you tame, and others do not. Vezazu, what doesn't make you tame? Is a treifa shashachta. That's an animal that's treifa, that's not viable, and you did shchita, it's still in the vela. Okay, by Rav Hoshia. Hoshia d'sieldo l'mei behema. What if, here's a weird case, you've got a pregnant animal, you've got a fetus inside, you stick your hand into the womb with a knife and do shchita on the fetus. And the fetus is a live fetus that's 9 months gestated. Okay, so it's viable. You do um, you do um, the shchita on the fetus, and you take out the fetus mouth. So does that shchita count? Right. So ordinarily shchita is only done on a independent living animal. What if you do shchita on a fetus while it's still in the mother's womb? a weird case. I mean, it's hard to imagine how you could do a valid shechita that way, but let's say it's theoretical. Tibayler Meir. So now we're going to refer to a Mishnah that's coming up at the bottom of the page. The question applies to both Reb Meir and Rabbanan. Let's take a sneak peek ahead at the Mishnah. Shochet of behema, down at the bottom of the Amud, three lines up. Shochet is a behema. If you slaughter an animal, matzah bab and shmona chai omes, and you find an 8-month fetus within it, either live or dead, but 8 months, as we said, is not viable. Oben tisha meis, or a 9-month fetus, but it's already dead. Karo, then you can just tear it. You don't need to do shchita. You could. It's like part of the mother. Umotzias damo, but you do have to first remove the blood because you're not allowed to eat the blood. Masav and tisha chai, if you find a 9-month fetus that's alive, ton shchita requires shchita. And there's another halacha, which I don't know if we've discussed yet or not, but also you can't do shchita on a mother and a child on the same day. So the Tanakama of the Mishnah, who we're going to attribute to Reb Meir, Reb Meir says you have to do shechita on this 9-month fetus. Reb Meir, yeah, it says right here, it's Reb Meir. The rabbis say shechita sima matarata. If we're talking about a mother that has been undergone shechita, then you don't need to do shechita on the fetus. So the Gemara says, now back to our Gemara. So we're wondering about, you do shechita on the 9-month fetus inside the mother. It's we have to ask both according to Reb Meir and Rabban in the Mishnah. Tibayler Meir, Tibayler Rabbanan. Tibayler Meir, you can ask according to Reb Meir as follows: Ad kan lakom Reb Meir ben Pekua ton shchita. When does Reb Meir say that a ben Pekua, meaning the mother was slaughtered already? It doesn't need shchita. The child doesn't need shchita because it's inside the womb still. That's when it's already been born, right? But so Rameir says you still need to do shchita on a ben pekua, but that's if it's once it's been born. But within the mother, it doesn't need shchita. Maybe shchita doesn't even work within the mother. Or you could also ask going to Rabbanan. Arba simanim ashrei rachmana. The Torah gives you 4 simanim for in other words 4 what do you call there's in the shita you have to cut through the esophagus and the windpipe. So there's 4 in this case. There's the mother and the child. So you could say that a ben pekua can be validated, can be made kosher through the severing of either the mother's windpipe, either the mother's simanim or the child's simanim. So then, in other words, you could say that the Rabban, according to Rabbanan, if there's only 2 simanim, then you don't need shchita. But maybe it's either of the 2 simanim, either the mother or the child. Bring a proof. Harisha nolda treifa min habatan. If an animal that was born non-viable, so it was never potentially kosher. Yeah, so if that's the case, v'isa mashkachas la dahaisa la shasa kosher, you can. There is if you're going to say that shchita within the womb is valid, then because it's still part of the mother, it still has its ben pekua status. So then it did have so even an animal that was born treifa could have been shechted, could have been kosher before birth. Because you could have done this weird shita inside the womb, right? So in that case, by saying that there is such a thing as an animal that never had shasa kosher, you're implying that this maneuver doesn't work, right? That this idea that you could do shita within the womb doesn't work. Amalei Rava Tanei Shanotzra Treifa Min Abatan. When the Mishnah says the exact words were "Shenolda treifa min abaten." It was born treifa. What you have to read it as, it was formed yotzra notzra treifa min abaten. It was formed as treifa right from the wound. In other words, the treifa was even existed in the fetus even before it was born. So, for example, you have a fetus that has some, terrible birth defect, like 5 legs. So we're assuming that animal never had a shasa kosher. Um, but a normal fetus, you could say, okay, yeah, it had shasa kosher. And what the Mishnah is talking about is a birth defect type of case where even had you slaughtered it in the womb, it never would have been considered a kosher, potentially kosher animal. Okay, so now this Mishnah that we just referred to. Um, we'll just go over again. It shows the behema matzah ben shmona chayo meis or ben tisha meis. If you do a shlit on a mother and then you find an 8-month fetus within it or a dead 9-month fetus, so motzi estama karo. So you don't need shlita. You could just tear it up and use it. You eat the meat. Motzi estama. You do have to remove the blood because like any other animal, the blood is not permitted. Hey, Robert, we're at the bottom of Ein Daled Amud Aleph, 74a, just starting the Mishnah. So you can't eat the blood, but you don't have to do shchita on the animal itself because so everybody agrees that this is it doesn't require shchita. Because it's because it was inside the mother that was properly slaughtered. What if you find a 9-month fetus that's still alive within the slaughtered mother? Ton shchita. That animal requires shchita. And by the way, you can't do shchita on the same day as the mother because of the mitzvah. Don't do shchita on the mother and child on the same day. That's Reb Meir. But the rabbis say shchita sima matarata. Classic ben pekua. You do shchita on the mother. You find a 9-month fetus that's alive inside it that has benefited from the shchita of the mother and is permitted to eat as is. Rabbi Shimon Shazuri Omer. Afilu ben chamesh shanim v'charish basada. Even if the fetus, becomes, it lives a long and happy life, and 5 years old, and it's working in the field. Shchita sima matarato. It's still considered a ben pekua. For its whole life, it's a ben pekua, and according to the rabbi, according to Rabbi Shimon Shazuri, it does not require shchita. And so the Gemara will talk about how is Rabbi Shimon Shazuri different than the rabbis. The Rabbanan didn't say anything. They didn't say that there's a time limit here. So what's Rabbi Shimon Shazuri adding? We'll see in the Gemara. What if you didn't do shchita on the mother, but you killed it some other way, not proper shchita, and you find a 9-month fetus inside? Ton shchita. Then that animal, that fetus, requires shchita because I don't know why you would think differently. But it never benefited from shchita, neither it nor its mother, and so it's an animal that requires shchita. Regarding this 9-month fetus, it's only the only leniency here is about shchita itself. But with any other way, it's considered a regular animal. In what sense? Lumutemai, lumutoi chelbo v'gido. Okay, it needs shchita. It may not need shchita, but that doesn't mean you can eat the chelev or the gid of it. Okay, those rules remain the same. So chelbo demai. Wait, which chelev are we talking about? Ilema chelbo d'shlil. If you're saying the chelev of the fetus, then miflag plige. There's a machlokas about it. This time we have a brisa. Gid hanasha noeg b'shlil. The gid hanasha you can't from a fetus you cannot eat. The chelbo aser and the chelev also you can't eat. Divrei Reb Meir. Or Hila Omer ena noeg b'shlil. That these do not the gid hanasha does not apply. You can eat the gid hanasha of a fetus, the chelbo mutar, and also the chelev you can eat. So you have a machlokas. You have a Rabbi or a Roshaya. Machlokas ben tishachai. What are we talking about when it's a 9-month fetus that's still alive after you kill the mother? Um, so it's viable. V'halach Rameir l'shitaso, and Rameir, is following the same reasoning as he does in our Mishnah. V'Rabbi Yehuda l'shitaso, and Rabbi Yehuda follows the Rabban in our Mishnah. Ella chalba degid. So what are we talking about? So you can't say as Rabbi Lazar Rabbi Shaya said, you can't say that everybody agrees to this. No, the Brisa is clear that the machlokas is the same for this fetus as for as between the Rabban and Reb Meir. Ela Chobodid. So maybe what the Brisa is saying when there's no machlokas, it's talking about the chelev of the gid hanasha, that, like, I guess the fat that surrounds the nerve that we're talking about. Is it a nerve? I forget. It's yeah, I think it's a nerve. Miflik plie. But we also have machlokas about that. We have another brayso, the Tanya Gid Hanasha Mechatet Achrav B'chol Makom Shehu. You have to, like, really, dig it out from wherever it is, wherever it's embedded in the animal. V'chosech Shamno Meikaro, and you have to cut out all the fat around it. Divrei Meir, that's the Meir's view. Rabbi Yehuda representing the view of Rabban and our Mishnah. Gomemo im hashufi. You just have to kind of, level it off, right? You don't have to go take all the fat that's around the gid. You just have to remove the fat that's kind of connected to the gid. So we have machlokas. So how could Rabbi Elazar say that there's no machlokas about the gid hanasha or the chelav? Al imar hachimar. This is what you have to say. How you have to reread Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Shaya. Lo hilchubo ela al iske achila bilvad. The machlokas is about things related to eating, but regarding other things, it's a regular animal. And what does that mean? Limuute rova v'charishbo. You can't, if this animal is the subject of bestiality, then you can't use it. You can't get benefit from it. Then you can't use it. So regardless of how it was born, whether it was a ben paku or not, regarding eating, then that's the machlokas our Mishnah. But regarding anything else, like, can you use the animal in the case where it was subject to bestiality? Then it's like any other animal. It's not saved by its ben pekua status. Amar Shum ben Lachish, l'divrei hamatir bechelbo matir bedamo. Rabbi Huda, who says you can eat the chelev around that's around the gid. Sorry, not the gid, just the chelev, right? That you can eat the chelev of this 9-month fetus whose mother was shachted. If you're matir the chelev, you're also matir the blood, which is not like our Mishnah. And according to Reb Meir, who says no eating the chelev also means no eating the blood. Rabbi Yochanan says, like our Mishnah, that no, the blood is off limits regardless. Acer Rabbi Yochanan Rishon ben Lakish, so Rabbi Yochanan asks, Karo Motzi Astama, what about our Mishnah? Right? Our Mishnah said clearly that regardless of the status of the chalev, you can kill. If you have the 8-month fetus, which is not viable, or a dead 9-month fetus, it doesn't. The mother was shachted, so the fetus doesn't require shchita. You can just eat the meat, but you can't eat the blood. So it seems clear that the blood is off limits, regardless of the circumstances of the whether it's a ben pekua or not. Now it's telling you that you can't eat the blood, but the blood is not subject to the usual kares punishment. It's just a regular lav. Lamankam, right? And, like, who is this according to? Rabbi Yehuda. So Rabbi Yehuda, because Rabbi Yehuda is the one who says you can eat the chalev, so the blood should be like the damatamsis, right? Remember that there's the first blood that comes out of the animal, and then there's the dam hatamsis, and the dam hatamsis. It should be at least like the dam hatamsis, right? Like the remaining blood. So yes, Kares applies to the first blood that spurts out of the animal, but you should at least have the lav, like all the other blood is subject to the lav of damatamsis. So this fetus should also, like, why would you exempt the blood altogether? It should be at least like the blood of the rest of the mother. Titania damatamsis vashar. We have a brisa that says that damatamsis, this remaining blood, is lotase. Rabbi Yehuda Omer behi kares, but Rabbi Yehuda says it's kares. So if Rabbi Yehuda says that the dam hatamsis is subject to kares, so why would the blood of the fetus be any different? It's still within the mother. It should also be subject to kares. So don't tell me that Rabbi Yehuda wants to make it only a love. So Rabbi Yosef explained it as follows. Rabbi Yehuda says that kares is the punishment for both dam and kol dam, right? It says kol dam lo tochelu. So kol hechad b'chayav adam hanefesh, wherever you're chayav on, adam hanefesh, wherever you're chayav on the lifeblood, like the regular blood from the animal, b'chayav adam hatamsis, you're also chayav for the remaining blood. But if you weren't in the first place, if there's no dam hanefesh, because the fetus isn't yet born, so you can't really apply the idea of dam hanefesh, right? It doesn't have its independent life. So lama chayva dam hatamsis, then the dam hatamsis wouldn't be. So that's the basis for saying that the dam hatamsis of the fetus can be distinguished from the dam hatamsis of the mother, because the fetus never had the initial stage of dam hanefesh. Next question. Can you use a ben pekua to do pidyon chamor, a pater chamor? So the rule is if you have a firstborn donkey, you have to redeem it with a seh, with a sheep. So can you use a ben pekua for this purpose? I'll leave it to Rameir lo to bailach. I'm not asking according to Rameir to kevin the arton shchita samal yehi. Rav Meir, we have to say that Rav Meir says, look, there's no difference for this fetus. For this ben pekua. It's a regular animal, it needs shtita. So why would I say that there's any other restriction on its use? Or not restriction, but any other difference between it and a regular animal. The question is according to Rabbanan in the Mishnah, who say that it doesn't need shchita. So then I'm going to ask the question, Kevan di Amre Mai. What's the din? Kevan di Amre Shchitas Imam Tarato. Since you're saying that the shchita of the mother makes the ben pekua kosher kivisra de bedikulahu, then it's not an independent animal. It's like part of the meat of the mother. It's like meat in the pot. Odilma, or maybe Kevan de Rahit Va'azil V'Rahit V'Yaseh. On the other hand, look at the thing. It's running around. It's running around in the field. It's obviously an independent creature. So why shouldn't it be used for? Indeed, it has a different din regarding shchita because of the circumstances. But it's like an independent creature. So it's a set. It's a sheep. Why would you say it can't be used for pigeon? Sekri Nebe. It's a set. Marzutra Amar. So what do we conclude? Marzutra says Ein Podin, Rav Ashi Amar Podin. So Marzutra says no, you can't use it for pidyon, and Rav Ashi says yes. Amalei Rav Ashi Marzutra. So Rav Ashi says to Marzutra, who says no pidyon, you can't use it. My datach. What's your opinion about this? The Gemara says mipsachim. I'm assuming that just like this is a seh, the seh for a carbon pesach is a seh. So since it can't be used for carbon pesach because the carbon pesach, independently of the requirement for kosher meat, it still requires shchita, right? So you can't use a ben pekua because it doesn't require shchita, right? You need something that requires shchita. So if we're going to apply that to the carbon pesach as a seh, maybe we should apply that to the pidyon. The seh that's used for a pidyon should also require shchita. But if that's your argument, so you're telling me that the Pesach has to be the same as the sheep for pidyon. But what about the other rules? There are other specific rules to a carbon Pesach. It needs to be male. It needs to be tamim, no blemish. It needs to be a year old. Those things don't apply to to the Sefer Pidyon. Afghan Zachar talking about Shalom. So if you want to say that the Seh of the Pesach has to be the same kind of Seh as for the Pidyon, then you should apply these other rules as well, but we don't. So Mazuk will answer Tifta Tifta Riba. Um, because when the Torah discusses the Pidyon, it uses the word Tifta more than once. Tifta Tifta Riba Afilu Kol Miliname. Um, so so if you're going to say that the additional Tifta includes something, why don't you say it includes a Ben Pekua? The Ben Pekua is being explicitly allowed by the Torah for Pidyon. Mar says the Marzitra would say no. Imkain seh maya hanilach. So then, what's the point of having the Gzera Shava of seh? Since the Gzera Shava teaches you that this has to be similar for the Korban Pesach, um, this is the only thing we can think of to apply it to. That it can't be a ben pekua, and use the tifta tifta would be for a different purpose. Yibailu. Next question. Ma'un limnos bo rishon v'sheni. What about the idea of Rishon Latuma and Sheni Latuma? So as you know, Tuma was extended by the Rabbanan that there are additional lesser degrees of Tuma, that if A touches B and B touches C, these, at some point the Torah definition of Tuma doesn't carry forward anymore, but according to Rabbanan it does. So what about applying that to this fetus? So, in other words, what's a case in point is you do the shita on the mother, right? And then the body, the carcass of the mother became tame by touching an avatuma. Okay, so now the mother is a rishon, and is the fetus a rishon like the mother, or is it sheni latuma? So it's something that's touching the rishon. Rabbi Yochanan Amar Moni Bo Rishon Mesheni. Rabbi Yochanan says, yes, we do consider the levels, and the fetus is a level 2, Risheni Latuma. Rishon Ben Laki Shomer, Ein Monim Bar Rishon Risheni. No, it's all one big thing, and the fetus itself is all, like the mother, is a Rishon Latuma. Nasa ke'egos hamiskashkesh b'klipaso. An analogy would be a nut in a shell. Okay, you don't say that the nut has a lesser degree of tuma after the shell is touched. No, the nut as a whole is all the same degree of tuma, and even when you break it open and you remove the nut, it's the same level of tuma. Eiz Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish says to Rabbi Yochanan, Habasar. Abasar Maga Nevela. So we had this Mishnah earlier. Um, if this is when the fetus sticks a leg outside of the womb, and then the mother is slaughtered while the limb is outside, and then then the limb is cut off. Habasar Maga Nevela, the meat of the fetus, which was attached to the limb and now is removed from the limb, it's tame because it was touching this. It had, it was touching. I mean, it was part of the limb that then became tame. So the fetus itself becomes tame. Divrei Meir, the Chachamim, but the rabbis say maga treifa shchuta. Yes, the flesh is tame, the meat is tame, but because it not because the leg that came off is considered nevela, but rather because it's a treifa, right? Contact with a treifa that was slaughtered. Okay, so so according to Reish Lakish, who says it's just considered one big body, like the nut in the shell, it's kasher b'dama deime. That's why. So the question here is, what about hechsher tuma? So you may remember that before something can become tame, it has to come in contact with one of the 7 liquids, yad shachatam. So how does this severed leg, become? How does it get hechsher tuma? By the blood of the mother. Um, so um, when the mother's blood, obviously the blood of when you do the shechita, the blood of the mother is touching the mother itself, and so the whole body, including the fetus, becomes tame. Um, Elodidach, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says that basically the fetus and the mother are separate, but ma'is kasher. So how does where is the hechsher tuma for the fetus? Malay b'shchita, through the act of shchita itself. Rabbi Shimon, according to Rabbi Shimon, who says that the act of shchita removes the requirement of hechsher tuma, or hechsher tuma is accomplished by the shchita. You don't need the liquids. Okay, and let's see. Yeah, let's go on a little bit. There's a good place to stop for today, maybe. A little bit more. Eis Rabbi Yochanan Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. So Rabbi Yochanan asks, Avar benahar huchshar. If it passed through a stream, then that is considered hechsher tuma. Halach akvaros nitma. And then if it afterwards goes to a cemetery, it becomes tame. Bishlam l'didida amina tregufe ninu. So according to me, that I say that they're considered two separate bodies, right? And the fetus is within the mother. Mishum hache huchshar in lo huchshar lo. That's why it needs hechsher tuma. But according to you, it says it's just one body. Ha is kasher b'damadim. The fetus has a hechsher tuma. Why does it need to go through the stream? It should become tummy even without going through the stream. So the answer is b'shchita yeveshta. We're talking about a dry shchita, a weird case where you do shchita on the mother, blood doesn't come out, doesn't spurt out, so the blood doesn't come into contact with the skin of the mother. Udulo Rabbi Shimon, and not according to Rabbi Shimon, who said that you don't that shchita is good enough for hechsher tuma, so ignore that opinion. And it could be a case where there was no blood, and so there was no hechsher tuma, and that's a weird case, but it's a way to wiggle out of it. And now we will stop here for today and pick it up here tomorrow. Have a good day.